Hey everyone, and welcome to a deep dive that'll really get you thinking.
Sounds intriguing.
It is. We're going to be taking a critical look at evolutionary theory today.
Okay.
And we've got two sources that are, well, let's just say they don't hold back.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
Lay it on me.
One is this text called A Critical Examination of Evolutionary Theory.
Mm-hmm.
And the other is a YouTube video.
Okay.
With English subtitles titled Shue she 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 he she day a yinku ogu ye ye she she che rowan jokal.
Wow, that's a mouthful.
I know, right?
So what's the common thread between these two sources?
They both take a pretty skeptical view of evolutionary theory.
Okay.
They're questioning some of its fundamental principles, and they're not afraid to use strong rhetoric to make their points.
Interesting.
Like right off the bat, they claim there's no direct scientific proof that one species actually evolves into another.
Ah, so they're going right to the heart of the matter.
Yeah.
And what's their reasoning behind that claim? What do they consider to be proof in this context?
Well, they basically say, if evolution is this constant process, shouldn't we be seeing these transformations happening all around us?
So they're looking for real-time observable evidence of speciation.
Yeah, it seems like they want to see it happening right before their eyes.
That's a pretty high bar to set, don't you think?
It is. But then what about the fossil record?
Right.
Don't fossils show those transitions over time?
Well, that's where their critique of what they call scientism comes in.
Scientism.
Yeah, they argue that some scientists are so committed to a materialistic worldview,
Okay.
where everything has to have a physical explanation,
Right.
that they might be interpreting the fossil record through that very specific lens.
I see.
Even if it means overlooking other possibilities.
Like what?
Well, they don't really offer specific alternatives.
Okay.
But their point is that a purely materialistic approach could be limiting our understanding of how life evolves.
That's an interesting thought. They actually quote Richard Lewontin.
Oh, the evolutionary biologist.
Yeah, and he said, "We take the side of science in spite of the patent absurdity of some of its constructs because we have a prior commitment, a commitment to materialism."
That's quite a provocative statement.
It is. It kind of makes you wonder if there's room for other interpretations, right?
Definitely. It raises questions about whether our assumptions are shaping our understanding of the evidence.
Now, on the topic of the fossil record,
Okay.
both sources are particularly skeptical of those so-called transitional fossils.
The ones that are supposed to show the in-between stages.
Exactly.
Yeah, those are often at the center of debates about evolution.
And they specifically bring up the case of Pheomycetus anubis.
The four-legged whale.
Right. So what makes them question this particular fossil?
Well, the YouTube video goes into quite a bit of detail about how limited the fossil evidence actually is for this creature.
Really?
Yeah, they found a skull, some vertebrae, and a couple of ribs.
So not a complete skeleton.
No, and based on these few bones, the researchers reconstructed an entire creature.
Including the four legs.
Exactly.
So are they saying that the depiction of this whale with four legs is basically speculation?
Kind of. The video claims that the reconstruction is heavily influenced by pre-existing ideas about whale evolution.
So they're implying that the researchers might be filling in the gaps based on what they expect to see rather
Yeah.
than what the evidence actually shows.
That's the gist of their argument, yeah.
Okay, so we've got potentially some bias in interpretations, and then they also challenge the whole concept of natural selection as a true driving force of evolution.
How so?
They argue that survival of the fittest is a tautology.
A what?
A tautology.
Okay, remind me what that means.
It's like a circular argument. It doesn't really offer a genuine explanation.
I see. So how does that apply to survival of the fittest?
Well, they're saying it's like saying those who survive are the ones who are best suited to survive.
Okay, I see. It's a bit like saying the winners of the race are the ones who run the fastest.
Yeah, exactly.
It's true, but it doesn't explain why those individuals were faster in the first place.
Precisely.
So they're arguing that natural selection doesn't really explain the origins of advantageous traits.
Right. Just that those with advantageous traits are more likely to survive.
And that's where they see the tautology.
Mm-hmm. And they even point out that some prominent scientists like Conrad Waddington and Ronald Fisher.
Oh, wow. Big names in evolutionary biology.
Yeah. They also had concerns about this potential for circular reasoning within the concept of natural selection.
So it's not just a fringe idea. Even within the scientific community, there's been debate about the nuances of how natural selection works.
Exactly. It's not a simple black and white issue.
Makes sense.
They also delve into this idea that similarities between organisms don't automatically mean they're closely related.
Okay, that's interesting because similarity is often used as evidence for common ancestry.
Right, but they use a fascinating example to illustrate their point.
Okay, I'm all ears.
Marsupial and placental mammals.
Oh, like kangaroos and...
Well, they talk about these marsupial squirrels that look almost identical to placental squirrels.
Wow, so there are squirrels with pouches.
Apparently so.
That's amazing.
Right. But they point out that according to evolutionary theory,
Yeah.
marsupials and placental mammals diverged millions of years ago.
Right, so they evolved along separate lineages.
And the YouTube video really emphasizes this. Like, how could these creatures end up looking so similar if they evolved along completely different paths?
So are they saying it's just a coincidence?
Well, they're skeptical of the traditional explanation.
Which is?
Convergent evolution.
Right, the idea that similar environments lead to similar adaptations.
But they're suggesting that maybe convergent evolution doesn't fully account for the level of resemblance we see in some cases.
So they're leaving the door open for other possibilities?
Yeah, they don't offer any definitive alternatives, but they encourage us to think about whether there might be other factors at play.
That's certainly a thought-provoking way to approach it.
Okay, so we've got missing links, potential bias, doubts about natural selection as the main driver, and now they're questioning how we assess relationships between species based on similarity.
It's like they're pulling at the threads of the whole evolutionary tapestry.
And they're not done yet.
There's more.
Oh yeah, they go into a few more specific examples.
Like what?
One of them is, well, let's just say it involves rodents and a rather incredible journey.
Rodents on a journey.
You heard that right.
Okay, you've got my attention. Tell me more.
So they talk about the migration of rodents from Africa to South America.
Wow, that's a long way for a little rodent.
And they point out that geographically, it's a bit of a challenge, to say the least.
No kidding. There's a whole ocean in between.
Exactly.
So how do they explain that? Flying rodents.
Not quite, but almost as unbelievable.
Okay, I'm on the edge of my seat.
The scientific explanation they present is that these rodents hitched a ride on these massive rafts of vegetation.
Rafts of vegetation?
Yeah, they were swept across the Atlantic Ocean by tsunamis.
Whoa, a tsunami-powered rodent cruise. Now that's an image.
I know, right? The YouTube video has a field day with this one.
I bet.
They use a lot of humor to basically say, come on, this is stretching the bounds of plausibility.
Understandably so.
They acknowledge that tsunamis can carry vegetation long distances.
Yeah.
But they question the likelihood of rodents surviving such a journey and then successfully colonizing a new continent.
It does seem like a rather precarious voyage for a bunch of rodents.
To say the least. Okay, so we've got skepticism about the rodent sea voyage.
Right.
And their critique extends to the very foundation of evolutionary change. Mutations.
Okay, so now they're going after the source of variation.
Yep. They argue that the whole idea of random mutations as the driving force of evolution is being challenged by new research.
Oh, interesting. What kind of research?
Well, they present evidence from this long-term experiment where bacteria were subjected to mutations over a period equivalent to 1 million years of evolution.
1 million years? That's quite a long experiment.
And the surprising result was that despite all these mutations, no new proteins emerged.
So despite all that change, there were no major innovations.
That's what they're saying.
That's fascinating. What are the implications of that for our understanding of evolution?
That's the question both sources pose.
They don't provide an alternative.
Not really.
Yeah.
But they highlight this experiment as a potential challenge to the idea that random mutations alone can account for the complexity and diversity of life.
So it's like they're saying, hold on, there might be more to the story than just random chance.
Exactly. It makes you think about the role of chance versus other potential mechanisms.
For sure, it opens up a whole new avenue of questions.
Okay, so far they've questioned fossil interpretations, natural selection, relationships between species based on similarity, rodent migration stories, and now mutations.
They have covered a lot of ground.
But there's actually quite a bit more.
Seriously.
Oh yeah. They go on to discuss the reclassification of Homo habilis.
The supposed human ancestor.
And the mathematical challenges of the human genome.
Wow, this is just the tip of the iceberg then.
It seems like it, but I think that's a conversation best saved for the next part of our deep dive.
Okay, I'm hooked. But before we move on, I'm curious about your take on all of this.
Yeah.
What stands out to you the most from what we've discussed so far?
I think what's most intriguing is how these sources, even though they come from very different perspectives, both converge on this idea that there are still many unanswered questions about evolution.
Yeah, they're really pushing us to think critically about what we accept as scientific truth.
Right, and to be open to exploring alternative perspectives.
It's a good reminder that science is a process of constant discovery, and questioning what we think we know is part of how we move forward.
Well said. We'll be back soon to unpack those remaining arguments, including Homo habilis and the human genome. You definitely won't want to miss it.
Can't wait.
All right, welcome back to our deep dive into these critical views on evolutionary theory.
Yeah, last time we really got into some head-scratching challenges to those standard evolutionary ideas.
We did, from like questioning mutations to that whole reevaluating the fossil record thing.
Right, and now I think we're getting into something a little more sensitive, but just as important.
Yeah, for sure.
And that's kind of what these critiques mean for understanding how we evolved.
Exactly. Both sources spend a lot of time on Homo habilis,
Right.
which has always been seen as like this key transitional species in our evolutionary line.
Yeah, the handyman, the tool maker.
So what's their take?
Well, they highlight that Homo habilis has been super debated in the scientific community.
Okay.
And, it's not a slam dunk that he's a direct human ancestor anymore.
Really? So like the guy we always see with the stone tools might not be our great-great-great-grandparent after all.
Maybe not so direct. They point to scientists like Bernard Wood, this paleoanthropologist,
Okay.
who says Homo habilis has way more ape-like features than we thought.
Like what kind of feature?
Skull size and shape, limb proportions, all this anatomy that looks more ape than later hominins.
So if Homo habilis is being reevaluated,
Yeah.
does that mean there's a missing link in our story?
That's what they're getting at. Taking Homo habilis out leaves a gap in the fossil record, so it's harder to see a straight line from apes to us.
Like each argument they make just makes human evolution more complex.
And the YouTube video goes even further. They bring up this mathematical challenge based on our genome.
Okay. The math challenge. Lay it on me.
So it's all about the sheer number of genetic differences between us and apes.
Okay.
The video says there are millions of differences.
Millions.
And based on how long it takes for good mutations to stick around in a population,
Yeah.
it would take way longer than Earth has existed for all those differences to happen.
Wait, so they're saying there hasn't been enough time for humans to evolve from apes?
That's the claim. The math just doesn't add up, even if evolution went at warp speed.
So are they saying what instead? Aliens?
Not really. They mainly use this as a challenge to the timeline we have.
Okay, so it makes you think about the speed and how evolution actually happens.
Right, they leave that part open.
But even with all these challenges, life does exist.
True.
Do they address that part?
They do, and they say the origin of life itself is the biggest problem for evolutionary theory.
So even if evolution is how life changes, explaining how it started is a huge hurdle.
Exactly. Abiogenesis, going from non-living stuff to living things, is like the biggest scientific mystery.
It's like, show me how you get from chemicals to a cell and then we'll talk.
That's a good way to put it. The YouTube guy is really big on this.
Oh, I bet.
They're like, we've never seen non-living stuff become alive. They admit scientists know more about life's building blocks now.
Right.
But going from blocks to a working organism, that's the leap we haven't made.
So they're not denying the progress, but they're saying we have a long way to go.
Exactly. And that gap in what we know means we shouldn't be too quick to say one answer is the answer.
Okay, so lots of open questions still.
Right. And it's important to remember these sources are giving us a very specific view.
Yeah, they're not trying to be super balanced or anything.
They pick the stuff that fits their argument.
And lots of scientists would argue back against these points.
Oh, for sure. There's always debate in science.
So it's not evolution is wrong.
Yeah.
It's more like there's lots we still don't know for sure about evolution.
Exactly. These critiques just help us think harder about life's beginnings and our place in the universe.
Well said. But now I'm curious, how do you feel about the way they present these arguments?
Oh, they're totally different.
Right.
The text is very academic, like a professor laying it all out.
In the YouTube video.
That's much more lively, I guess.
Yeah, lots of humor, even some sarcasm.
And it appeals to your emotions as much as your logic.
So two very different approaches.
Yeah, the video wants to grab you and make you question what you thought you knew.
It's interesting how someone says something affects how we see it.
Totally. So, is one way better?
I think both have good and bad.
Right.
Like, a professor can explain complex stuff clearly, but a passionate person can really make you pay attention. It's like one speaks to your head, the other to your heart.
I like that.
And maybe a mix of both is the best way to reach people.
It all depends on who's listening and where they're hearing it.
Okay, so we've explored fossils, how evolution works, those relationships between species, rodents on rafts, even mutations.
We've been busy.
But now, where do we go from here?
Well, I think these sources leave us with a really big question, one that's almost philosophical.
Okay, I'm ready. Hit me with it.
If we still don't know how life began, what does that say about us in the universe?
Whoa, that's a question to ponder for a long time.
It is.
And I think that's the perfect way to lead into the last part of our deep dive. We'll be back soon to tackle that very question and see what it all means for how we see ourselves and where we came from. And we're back for the final part of our deep dive into these critical takes on evolutionary theory. It's been quite a journey, wouldn't you say?
It has. We started by asking some really basic questions. And now we're wrestling with this huge question, almost philosophical,
Definitely. Like, where do we fit in if we can't even explain how life got started?
That's it. That's the question hanging over all these critiques. If the origin of life is such a mystery, what does that tell us about our place in the whole universe?
Makes you feel kind of small, right?
A bit. It's like we bump up against the limits of what science can tell us.
Yeah.
And maybe there's more to life's story than we can grasp right now.
Both these sources we looked at, they keep saying that not being able to fully explain abiogenesis,
Right.
that non-living to living thing jump.
It's a big weakness in the whole evolution story.
Yeah, they say even if we take all the evidence for evolution as change over time, that mystery at the beginning makes you doubt everything.
It's like, imagine a book, we're missing chapter 1.
Okay.
You can follow along after that.
Right.
But without that setup, the whole story feels incomplete.
And that missing chapter, it really changes how we see ourselves. Yeah.
Totally. Like, if we can't say how life came from non-living stuff just through natural ways, does that mean other explanations are possible?
Things beyond science as we know it.
That's where these sources are pointing. They don't have the answers.
Right.
But they want us to think bigger, to admit we don't know everything. And maybe life's story is even more amazing than we thought.
Kind of humbling, right? All this science, and we still don't know where we came from.
It is, but it's also exciting.
How so?
There's so much left to discover, mysteries to solve.
Like we're explorers on the edge of a new continent.
Exactly. And instead of being scared of not knowing, these sources want us to embrace that, to dive into the unknown with curiosity.
Not just with our scientific minds, but like with a sense of awe.
Totally. To be humble, our understanding of the universe and our place in it.
It's always changing.
Always.
So wrapping up this deep dive, I think it's honest to say we didn't get all the answers.
True.
But was that the point anyway?
I don't think so. What matters are the questions we ask.
How they challenged what we thought we knew, and that feeling of wonder they gave us.
The journey is as important as reaching the end.
And seeking understanding never ends. We gotta be open to new ideas, question everything.
And just be amazed by the mystery all around us.
Beautifully said.
Thanks for joining us on this deep dive into evolution, all its twists and turns.
It's been great exploring this with you.
And everyone listening, keep asking questions, keep exploring, keep going on those deep dives.
Keep those minds curious.